Hello. I got a little bit
Hello.
of background, but it is Wednesday, and we're here again, DebateSensei, like Groundhog Day, every week without fail. We got Matt Shapiro,
Hello.
mustachioed pencil. We got Tim Seavey, San Diego State
Freshly shaven.
Yes, there we go.
I hope the carpets match the drapes.
And
Hardwood.
I am the farthest thing from
Linoleum.
All right. So this week we are talking about preparation time. Now we're specifically talking about the types of debate that have limited preparation. The NPDA, APDA, IPDA, public forum, right? Those things are all of those are limited preparation types of debate. And so we're talking about the moment where you get your topic, what do you do until the moment you start talking? Right?
Well, public forum, we should maybe caveat, that's still, you still get significant prep time with that.
I just wrote down on my legal pad here, public forum is a little bit different. There's like months in advance. A month, 3 weeks. Tim and I discussed this before.
Yeah.
So it's still kind of the same, but like it's not 30 minutes or
you're right.
15 minutes.
That's kind of a medium part. I was just kind of shoving it in together because I still think that the process is might be kind of the same.
Sure.
Whereas like for like policy debate and NFALD,
right.
I don't know about you, but I have a different sort of prep time process that I do for that.
It's constantly changing throughout the year, and I mean, unless you're just
right. I probably should have put it in there. It's more of like the 20-30 minute prep time.
Well, we'll sprinkle in some public forum for the public forum crowd.
Yeah, maybe
whoever that is.
Yeah.
So that's I enjoy. I mean, you can stress test stuff a little bit better with public forum, but you're right. Like a month is not a lot of time. You come out of LD, at least at the collegiate level, and policy with a master's degree of knowledge on a subject, like one single thing. You come out an expert. Versus like public forum, like you get to know 8 to 10 topics, like pretty well, but not like super in depth. So the short prep though, so BP, NPDA, IPDA, you've got very little time to come up with a whole ton, which means you have to, I mean, and some people see that as like, oh great, that's a low bar to entry, right? Like I don't have to work a ton on it. I would think it's a little bit the opposite. Like, yes, you don't have, there's not nearly the same like research burden on it, but that means you just have to know the structure, know how to build it really damn well. Like the Army Corps of Engineers are maybe not like the, HGTV of like building stuff, but damn, can they build something fast? Like, because they know how to build things really well. So that's kind of what you're like. You have to be able to craft these arguments by knowing all the structure, all the ins and outs, and then just fill in the blanks with whatever new information that you research in 5 minutes. So that's actually what I really wanted.
It's like a prefab home, except you're gonna shove some content in there,
Yep, exactly. So I was interested in knowing, Jared, how do you segment prep time? So topic comes out, you write it on the board. Now, I guess I'll give 2 questions to this. The world of before COVID and a little bit nowadays, where we have group prep rooms in some cases where like people are all physically in a room together. But then I also still want to talk about online because that just had some wild, cool implications for what prep looks like. But starting with the in-person, traditional, and hopefully more of what the future looks like, what does prep look like the moment you get the topic, Jared?
Okay. So it does change from topic to topic, but I do think that there is a general approach that I take. And I probably spend, so let's say we're doing the 30 minutes prep, okay? I think
IPDA is normally 30, right?
Yeah. So I'm usually putting in like 3 to 5 minutes doing big picture thinking about what the central debate issue is, right? Like I'm really trying to think. So what that means, like as a method, usually if I'm on the negative, I think about it for 5 minutes if I were on the affirmative.
Jared, I don't want to cut you off. I want you to finish, but it almost reminds me of the speech itself, where, in a speech you say, I'm going to do my intro for, 30 seconds to 45 seconds. I'm going to do my plan for a minute or two, and then I'm going to allocate 2 or 3 minutes for each advantage. In the same way you kind of split that up, Jared is already getting to kind of what I wanted to talk about, where you kind of think of prep time that way. You're like, in 5 minutes, I need to have a big picture understanding of what I need to do. By the end of
people to be too tied to it, you know what I mean? It's because
no, you're right. You're right.
I break that all the time. You know what I mean? It's like whatever the topic calls for. Sometimes we're sitting there for more than 10 minutes still thinking about big picture stuff.
And that and there's a very fine line between thinking through, analyzing, and developing a good idea and spinning wheels. So for different levels of debaters who are hopefully watching this, if you need a template, you can do as I kind of just mentioned, like just as a rule of thumb, make sure you're writing out plan and advantages by 10 minutes in. But if you're, maybe a little more comfortable with, when I figure it out what I want to do, I will be able to execute quickly. Yeah, you can spend more time on thinking of a really good idea, more so than just trying to develop a speech for 10 minutes.
What would you say, Tim? You did NPDA. You've coached plenty of teams.
Yeah, the beginning
the first
is just
5 minutes. What are you
research.
doing in like the first 5 minutes?
So usually like background research or throwing out like what you already know, right? So it also kind of polling the room when you've got group prep rooms. That was a little bit of a different experience because like my squad as a competitor was rarely a group prep room.
Right.
Sometimes you got a coach, but typically it was you and your partner. So you just throw out like,
or Fire Pie is always like
Here's
that.
What I know about this, and then let's do some research. Let's divvy up roles. When you've got a group prep room, which I feel like is more and more squads now, that seems to be the norm. You poll the room real quick. Who knows anything about this? Like, does anyone feel like they've got a good grasp of what this topic is? Because they can, help summarize really quickly rather than you have to do a bunch of research. But then start tasking different people with different tasks. So part of it also, just from a coaching perspective, is in advance dividing up the room, affirmative and negative, get on different sides of the room, assign coaches to them. But then sometimes we'll do the same thing with more kind of national circuit versus novice competitors, so that we've got different coaches coaching different things. So that's just like the logistic of it. Once you're actually into it and doing the research on it, writing out kind of what are the key harms is really where I start. So in doing the very base research, I feel like Google News, whatever, will typically give you the harms. You can write out like problem, and then start coming up with a solution to those, or you can just literally Google solution to fill in the blank with whatever those problems are. And I feel like more resolutions have become more prescriptive, right? Like the United States federal government should implement such and such to solve such and such, right? So it's very direct, and you don't have to get crafty with the plan necessarily. But if the resolution is broad enough that it allows for inventive plans, then that's the next thing I go for. It's like harms first, plan second, and then just kind of, brainstorm some different plans. Don't get married to one, but brainstorm some different plans to see just how well they solve.
I was just going to kind of touch on, you mentioned dividing the work, which I like. When I think of, at my most advanced competition in debate, I probably would be very comfortable with, let's just pretend I'm in the affirmative and we're doing parley. My affirmative, my partner who's running prime minister, if he's like, or she was like, I'm going to prep our plan and everything, that goes with the prime minister's speech, and we're going to be talking about X. It wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for the member to just start anticipating, prepping for, what they're going to be doing, or at least responses to what they could say. It's really smart because it's hard to kind of get all this work done. It could be a lot of work if you let it. So it's kind of an interesting way to go. I would say, if you're not fairly comfortable with either the arguments or the structure, I should say, or the content of the arguments, maybe you don't divide the work, because you need to understand what everyone's doing to really kind of go into a round confidently and not be worried about not knowing things.
Part of it, like I was just thinking, I think I might have skipped over some stuff about like knowing who my judge and my opposition is a important part of prep time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that kind of sometimes you know teams well enough to know like what their projects are, what their arguments are, you know what I mean, and anticipate stuff that's coming at you.
Yeah.
And if you know enough about your judge, you can anticipate how they will receive those kind of arguments. And so you can start putting in work that way. In fact, like that's one of the best ways that I learned how to pick up rounds is, I mean, it's really simple. It's audience analysis. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's not, it's just, you're thinking about how the judge is going to react, but also if you know a bit about your opponent, which if you do this long enough, you do, you know, you could really sort of be strategic, if for no other reason than to avoid problematic arguments for yourself, you know, where you're kind of getting kind of sucked into an area that you feel like you're out of your depth.
Sure.
To get back where you were at earlier, Jared, I think it was a kind of an interesting way to do this, and I kind of would like to follow with it. So Jared originally said, you know, first 3-5 minutes, big picture. And I think what he means, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you know, it's like, let's just take a resolution. This house would prioritize the environment over the economy. So in first 5 minutes, it's like, let's do solar energy. That's what we're going to do.
Well, first off, like, what side are we on?
That's a good point. So I'm assuming I'm the AF. I mentioned I was the AF earlier.
Yeah. So if we're on the affirmative, what was it? The environment over the economy?
Right.
Right. And
so a big picture. What's your conclusion to the big picture phase of the first 5 minutes before you move to the next?
Remember though, what I said was when you're doing big picture, you're thinking in terms of your opponent. So if I were on the negative and I was talking about the economy, I would talk, you know, over the environment. I think I would want to instinctively gravitate towards like how poverty affects life. You know what I mean? Human life and quality of life. And so I want to, so on the, now I can come back to the affirmative and kind of go, all right, when I'm talking about the environment, I need to be talking about it in terms of quality of life, because that'll preempt this sort of argument that I'm expecting from the negative. It gets me ahead on that debate, and now they are playing catch up. And now what I do is start thinking about, okay, what sort of case do I have that will kind of fit into this environmentalism being a mechanism for like quality of life, or what advantages am I going for? That might be a better, you know what I mean? So if I'm doing a climate change thing where I'm trying to reduce the amount of carbon going into the air, I might be talking about low-lying nations that are going to cease to exist. You know, like entire peoples are not going to have
coastal area, low level coastal areas.
The entire nation is only a few feet above sea level, and they're going to have to go somewhere. So I'm like, okay, that seems to be like, I'm going to go for that advantage. I'm going to have that be part of my story, because now that's the first sort of foray into quality of life,
which is relying on things, you know. By the way, we still haven't grabbed a phone, we still haven't looked on the internet. He's you know, hopefully you can pull some of these things from things you've learned, hopefully in your debate class, in extem speeches, or in life. I mean, in the news.
Man, like if you want to be a good debater, you got to make some lifestyle decisions.
Yeah, you need to know what's going on a little bit.
Yeah, one of them is like listening to the news regularly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Following the news regularly.
And while watching the news, telling yourself, you know, you can almost tell yourself, you know, I know exactly how I could turn this into a plan. I know exactly how I could turn this into advantage, and think along those lines, because it does happen just all the time in the world, in your classes, in the news.
Sure. And I think another big piece of it, kind of talking to the point before of like a limited prep debate means you've done all of your prep well ahead of time, is having planned cases, having case files done, having cases already written. And that's an important work that every team that, you know, is out there is or should be doing. And that's having just kind of preset, here's the arguments we're going for. And the same thing happens at the upper national levels with critiques of like, all right, here is this important critical argument that we've got. Here are a bunch of different common scenarios of how we would link it in. And that same thing, you know, happens in prep time. It's like, all right, we already know that we know the judge, we know the opponent, we know that we're going to be going for this type of a critical AF, right? Now it's just a matter of finding links. And so we need to dig into the topic just enough to find that And that's what really happens. It feels like at some of the deepest, out rounds and things, it's not really about the topic anymore. It's really just like, how can we get enough links into it? And I think even if you're going more straight up at like local level stuff, the plan, the advantages, a lot of that stuff is done ahead of time. Like, where you're going into the story you're telling. You're now just filling in details so long as, that topic kind of fits in with what you want to do.
There's a blurry line, and I will tell you to take what we're saying with a little bit of a grain of salt. Certain tournament rules, for instance, we're talking about pre-written arguments. What we're really saying, I think, what we're really saying is you need to understand how to rapid fire out these arguments on a piece of paper in 30 minutes. There are tournaments that specifically say you cannot, and you can't. In my mind, it defeats the entire limited prep purpose if you have plans typed out, written up, that you're just going to pull out of your backpack or your computer. There's an aspect of when we say pre-written, we mean you have, back in the day, we used to have to fill up these boxes full of newspapers. And once you filled up your box, in your head, you knew basically kind of what was in those newspapers. So that way, when you had to come up on the fly, you knew how to develop that plan because you pre-wrote the plan in your head before you got there. If you write out whole plans in your limited prep rounds, I would, as a judge at least, I would vote you down. I mean, that's weird. That's weird to me.
Oh,
I mean, that happens all the damn time, though. Like, you have
I don't doubt it.
environmental versus economic debate. Like, those happen all the time. You have we should change, healthcare policy, or we should eliminate student loans, or we should, defund whatever military. Like, there are common enough topics out there that like a smart team knows what they're going to argue ahead of time on those, or like
knows what they're going to argue.
Knows,
yeah.
Oh yeah, economy versus environment. We've done that 1,000 times. Here's the way that I'm going to make that go. So that's just a matter of like experience. And you are not allowed to copy paste pre-written stuff. Yes.
Right.
At upper levels, you do expect to have pre-written files. So like the topics are pre-written for you at NPTE. Like they're preset, so you have the opportunity to research in it. But even at tournaments where you don't have predefined stuff, you still have disadvantage blocks. You have large critical positions. Like you've got these things already preset out. You still have to type them in the moment or physically handwrite them in the moment just to comply with the rules. But you do still have the meat of your raw materials, so to speak. If you're going to build this house, you still have all your raw materials with you. You don't come into a debate starting from absolute scratch with no knowledge of where you're going to go.
Well, hold on. So that does happen. That does happen, and I think that's kind of. I
encourage you not to do that.
We're 17 minutes in. We're 17 minutes in, and we're going to start talking about the next. After the 5 minutes is over. So at some point, I mean, you assuming you don't have everything all planned out for your limited prep event, it's not unusual to research using the internet if the tournament allows.
Sure.
And once the tournament allows it, which more and more tournaments allow it, it's kind of the.
I'm pretty sure. Most of them do. Yeah.
Most at this point do.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So now you have your big idea. You have a basic understanding of what you want to do, and you may not have sources. And it may be a little bit inductive in my approach. If you know what you want to do, you got to go find the stuff. You got to fill it in with sources because just saying things doesn't really matter. So that's where you do end up after the first 5 minutes, as Jared was talking about. You do get on your phone, right? You do get on your computer, and you're not texting your friend. You are searching. You're searching, or your coach. You're searching for evidence to fill in your structure, either whether it be on the AF or the NEG, and maybe you start anticipating arguments and researching responses to that type of stuff. But let's get into that with the last 10 minutes here. So, Jared, I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, so first off, you got to think about what if the research starts pointing the other direction, right? That's happened to me before, where I had this sort of I don't know why I had this assumption that that it was going this
when inductive argument goes wrong, right?
Going that direction, so when that happens, man, you gotta be ready to kind of make adjustments, all right? Because in limited prep, usually you're starting off with your sort of instincts and your experience about what direction you're going to go.
Right.
I mean, you have to have some sort of like
right.
point. Where
And I like thinking of a new person, because that's who I think we're really talking to. Like, after 5 minutes, you get your big idea. You get on the internet. You start filling in your plan text. You start filling in the agency. All that stuff. It needs to be filled in. And if you don't know, you use your phone. You use your computer with allowed internet. Do not cheat. But advantages. You start thinking those things through. As Jared mentioned, you should probably have some of that developed in your big picture idea. I need to find a plan text for this, and I'm going to run, seawaters don't go up as high if we care about the environment, to human health, human quality of life, and 3, some other, maybe not 3, but who knows. But 2 things, being able to pivot. If you are finding that the things you're trying to argue aren't there or something like that, hey, scrap it. You got to reframe, you got to redo it. Hopefully it is going your way, and you start filling in your plan. Or you're filling in
front lines are an important next piece that I will kind of pass over to you, Jared. So in being able to separate partners, you've got whoever your leader is, or your prime minister, they're going to town on whatever they're writing. At what point do you separate the partners and be like, all right, now you are prepping answers to T if you're on the affirmative, answers to likely disadvantages, or on the other side, like
the moment you guys know what the plan is, that's what it was. Is like the moment it's kind of like, all right, the plan is, my job is to come up with the advantages. Your job is to beat back the opposition strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, and so I'll make sure that I'll make sure that I got the research that's needed and the structure that's needed. So like I can pull the impacts through at the rebuttal time. You just got to make sure that you have answers to the counterplan, topicality, disadvantages, so I can pull that through.
And what you said is right, Jared. I was going to say, maybe suggesting knowing what your taglines for your advantages would also be helpful, because once the person who's prepping responses is done with responding to plan, theoretically done, they would also need to prep responses to the advantages. So whether you do it all at once, saying, okay, this is the plan and these are the advantages, I'm going to go research those, you get responses. Or plan text comes, you say, okay, you start prepping responses, but every time Jared finishes one of his advantages, he needs to look over at me and go, okay, the first advantage is this. And so now I have the ability to continue searching for responses and backup evidence to what he's doing, because it's more than just the plan. And to say, the advantages will be at issue or open to argument, just like the plan would be to the neg, or vice versa. We're talking about AF, but go ahead.
I'd be interested in your opinion on this. So Matt says, write an argument, pass it to your partner. Write an argument, pass it to your partner. Write an argument, pass it to your partner. And like that's kind of the iterative structures the partner can plan through it. I have seen it go very poorly when partners do not communicate during prep time. They're just like off writing their own things.
Yeah.
And then like they wait until basically the round starts. And that's when the member learns what the prime minister is doing. And like that certainly can be bad.
That's a bad idea.
But how much communication versus independence do you encourage when putting together, or when during prep time? How much should the speakers be working together versus independently?
I like the working independently and then coming together. Like I remember, like I did a summer tournament with a good friend of mine, Karen Nishi, and we paired up for that. There was this one time where she, like she got up and I think I was the prime minister and she was a member of government, and she got up and she sat down and she's like, "Oh man, I don't think I did very good," and we weren't really talking to each other. I'm like, you gave me everything I needed. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like I'm feeding her arguments. I'm listening to her arguments, and you should be on a ride or die mentality, in my opinion. It's kind of like, I don't care how bad your arguments are. You're my partner. They're the best damn arguments I've ever heard in my life. You know what I mean? And I polish them up. You know what I mean? I polish them up.
Jared likes being stroked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like it's important for him to know that you are there. I would say though that we mentioned earlier, if your partner knew some stuff about one of your advantages, though, it would be
Yeah,
it would save you time. You know what I mean?
Do it. Just don't overdo it. You know what I mean? It's like it's just for communication. I wouldn't do a whole lot of passing notes or anything like that. You're just kind of like sometimes like understanding the case helps you create answers to other positions. Like for sure they do. You can like look at subpoint C on the first advantage. It's like that answers this thing. That's good to know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you're flowing, you should catch that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like I think that it's really good to pair debaters up that have very similar sort of aptitude with each other, and that
it's hard to know that when they're brand new, though. I mean, I understand. I mean, you're talking about it like you got second place at a national parlay tournament. What's that?
Even the best novices, there's not that much of a difference with them.
Well, no, but I mean, if someone was brand new and they're watching our video going, what do I do in prep time? I mean, to say like, oh, just go do your own thing, let your partner do their own thing, and go flow. Like, that's a hardcore thing to say to like a first-time tournament goer. So, I mean, I think to, it's fluid. If you're comfortable, if it's a simpler resolution, everyone kind of understands what's going on, yeah, you have more independence. If both of you have no idea what's going on, it's more risky to kind of just do what you're saying, in my mind, because, especially if they don't know structure and stuff like that. Like those are the things that need to be fleshed out a little bit in prep time. And with our last 4 minutes, I was going to say, especially, I should say, on Prime Minister's speech, all speeches, it's not a bad idea with your last 4, 3, 5 minutes of prep time to start saying the arguments how you plan on saying them, seeing how you are going to word things, and maybe even seeing how, this can't take 20 seconds. This needs to take 2 minutes. So you need to kind of prepare yourself to understand, the story of your advantages or the story of your disadvantages. Stuff like that.
In olden times, we would have to walk to classrooms where the rounds happened.
Right.
And
walk and talk.
That's the time, right? That's when you tell the story to your partner. And that's what I tell the debaters. Like, all right, you were walking to your room. Or nowadays, SDSU's fortunately, we'll just do it on campus. So we'll have like one prep room, and then like 2 classrooms over is where they will compete virtually. But like they still get to be in the same room. So we're like, all right, on your walk from this classroom to the other classroom, PM, tell the MG the story. Or vice versa, like LO, tell the MO the story. And just make sure that communication happens. I make sure that like no less than a minute or 2 of prep time is spent with no coaches interjecting, no other teammates, no one else just like feeding them information. It is just the competitors talking to their partners.
Rehearsing to some degree, right?
So they've got an idea of it. I definitely had a round one time that I did not tell my partner hardly anything I was doing. They had a completely different argument that they brought up in the MG that like contradicted a bunch of stuff that I wanted to do in PMR. And I just wrote them a note, because it was back in the day of notes, that just said no and underlined it and passed it to them. Swear to God, she tore it off the paper, crumpled it, and hit me in the face with it, and like moved on to the argument, because like I realized that's a completely useless sticky note. That doesn't give any instruction or help whatsoever. That was a bad example of partner communication, but it could have been solved if I would have told the story better of like, here's what I want to do in the PMR, here's how we're going to argue this thing. So, do talk ahead of time just to make sure that you're on the same page.
One more thing. I mean, I'm just thinking of like when you're done with your prep time, unlike a lot of forms of debate, in limited prep, you will not have a full page of text. Okay, you are not going to write out your whole speech. What I meant to be more specific about fleshing out how you're going to discuss the speech. You very likely can be looking at a single string of your flow that just says, economy, plan, single words that just mean, solar panels, the Congress, like you can't just read that. You have to build the speech in your mind. You have to turn single words of a bullet pointed outline into a story. And so that's really what I mean. And Jared, who's laughing, is an expert. Okay, so he's laughing because it's very easy once you kind of know you can feel the time. But if you're nervous about feeling time, don't think you're going to write out your whole speech before the round. That's not ever going to happen in limited prep. So the part of the rehearsal is just kind of thinking in your head of how you're going to tell these bullet points and string them into a story. So,
I guess the last thing is get yourself into the right mindset. Remember that debates are, man, if you can win 75% of debates, you're a freaking genius. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're a freaking genius. All right. So 50% is still pretty damn good, believe it or not. You know what I mean? And so like be in the right perspective. It's like, okay, maybe you missed something during prep time, like where you were only given 30 minutes on a topic that you knew nothing about 30 minutes ago. Like that, it happens. Like when you're signing up for this, you're signing up for a little bit of unpredictability and how to deal with that. So
it's exciting.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like just don't think that you have to bat 1,000. Okay. Like, and so it's really more of a game of numbers. And so as long as you, so overall trust your prep time. I mean, like one of my the last lessons I learned in debate was to trust your prep time a little bit more. I mean, it was freaking final round of NPTE. We spent 20 minutes prepping one thing. We heard their case and decided to go completely different direction. And like we lost big time. And I'm kind of like, man, if we would have stuck with our original strategy, I bet it would have like gotten at least
Look
close.
at the sadness in his eyes. Do you see that?
With the vote.
Oh man.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I mean,
like,
don't give up. Don't give up on what you did. You worked hard. They only had 20 minutes. I mean, that's it seems all scary, but the reality is, I mean, everyone who's really good at this, it sounds like they know exactly what they're doing, but stick with you're right, Jared. Stick with what your plan is. You probably had a good plan.
Yeah.
Or give up.
It would have gone better. All right, everybody, that's our time here. We are DebateSensei. We will see you next week. All right? Adios.